On the morning of the 7th of March 1898, at 6:15, Mary Margaret O'Hanlon, aged 34, widow of Seattle, Washington, stepped off the steam launch Pilgrim onto the Pebble Beach at Dyea, Alaska, at the head of the Lynn Canal, in the company of her brother-in-law Kieran Patrick O'Hanlon, aged 31, and 8 other stampeders of the party known in the Dyea freight books as O'Hanlon and Company. 10 souls. The 10 souls had in the hold of the Pilgrim 15,260 pounds of outfit, being the minimum Canadian Northwest Mounted Police requirement of 1,500 pounds of provisions per person before any party would be permitted to pass the summit of the Chilkoot and descend into the Yukon Territory of the Dominion of Canada. The party's plan was to climb the pass in 6 stages, with each member carrying an 80-pound pack and returning for further loads in a system known to the freightmen as the relay, a system which would require each of the 10 to climb the 33 miles from Dyea to the summit, not 6 times but 30 to 35 times over a period of 10 to 12 weeks. Mary O'Hanlon had come north because her brother-in-law Kieran, who was the younger brother of her drowned husband Michael O'Hanlon, had invited her, 2 months after Michael's funeral in December 1896, to accompany him as an equal partner in the gold fields, both of them having inherited, in equal shares, the $340 of Michael's small Puget Sound oyster and clam operation, and neither of them having any reason to stay in Seattle. Mary had accepted within an hour of Kieran's offer, because she could not live another winter in the kitchen in which she had asked her husband on the evening of the 4th of December 1896 to row out to the clam flat off Vashon Island in a rising southwesterly, an errand from which he had not returned. At the supper fire on the beach at Dyea on the evening of the 7th, Father Louis Duvernay-Beaulieu, Society of Jesus, of Saint Marie-au-Sault in Upper Canada, 51 years old, with a neat gray beard and round steel-rimmed spectacles and a cassock under a bearskin coat, walked the 30 yards down the shingle from the Catholic mission tent to the O'Hanlon party's fire, and introduced himself to Kieran and to Mary and to the other 8 stampeders of their party. He had been assigned by his bishop in the September of 1897 to minister along the trail, and he had already, by the first week of March, buried 11 stampeders in the new Dyea cemetery on the east bluff, and heard the confessions of perhaps 200 more. He said in careful English with a French-Canadian accent, "Good evening, friends. I have come to offer only what I have. I cannot help you carry. I cannot help you dig. I can, at each of the 7 stages of the climb you will undertake, speak with any of you who wishes to speak, and I will say, at each stage, one of the 7 petitions of the Lord's Prayer, in the English you are accustomed to, so that you may carry it up the pass with you. I offer this to Catholics, to Protestants, to those of no fixed profession. I offer it without charge and without obligation. I will be camped at the foot of the scales at the stage you most need me, from the middle of March until the pass closes in June. Tonight I will speak the first petition, which is, Our Father, which art in heaven. It is a petition to remind you that the Father who receives you at the summit is the same Father who sees you at the bottom, and who has been watching every step between. Walk carefully. Carry kindly. I will be at Finnegan's Point tomorrow evening." Mary O'Hanlon heard the petition. She did not respond. She turned her face toward the fire. She was at that moment 2 years and 3 months into a grief she had not spoken of once to Kieran, or to any human being. She carried, in the inside pocket of her Mackinaw coat, a small tintype of Michael at 29, taken in the summer of 1895, and a folded sheet of paper on which she had written, on the evening of the 5th of December 1896, the words, "Michael drowned because I asked him to row." She had read the paper every morning for 2 years and 3 months. She had not shown it to anyone. She walked away from the fire. She walked 50 yards down the beach, alone. She looked up at the dark mass of the mountain above Dyea. She said to the mountain quietly, "If you are a father, I cannot meet you. My husband drowned because I asked him to row. I will climb you because I have nothing else to do. I will not ask you to forgive me. You owe me no forgiveness I have not purchased." She walked back to the fire. She slept. Over the first 7 days of the relay, the O'Hanlon party moved the 15,260 pounds of outfit, the first 4.5 miles of the trail, from the beach at Dyea to a cache at Finnegan's Point, a low spruce flat beside the Dyea River, where each stampeder had built a small platform of peeled logs to keep the bacon and the flour and the tea out of the spring meltwater. Mary was carrying on each of her twice-daily trips a pack of 64 pounds, which was less than the 80 of the men but more than Kieran had asked of her. She had refused the 80 only once, on the second day, when her shoulder-strap leather had rubbed raw through her muslin shift, and Father Duvernay-Bola had given her, at the supper fire that night, a small tin of bear grease with a label in French reading Onguent de Frère Antoine Ferme de la Mission, and had said only, "For the shoulders. It is made by a brother at the farm. It is not a charm. It is only fat." She had laughed for the first time in 27 months at the careful disavowal, and she had used the bear grease, and her shoulders had toughened in 4 days. On the 14th of March, as the party climbed from Finnegan's Point through the boulders to Canyon City, Father Duvernay-Bola, who was walking down the trail in the opposite direction with his breviary under his arm, said to Mary as he passed, "Madame O'Hanlon, the second petition, hallowed be thy name. The name of the Father is to be held apart from all the ordinary names. It is a name one does not say lightly. It is not a name to which one applies to oneself the ordinary verb of debt. Think on it." He walked on. Mary climbed on. She did not speak to him for another 11 days. Sheep Camp was the last great stampeder camp on the American side of the pass, 13 miles up the trail from Dyea, at an elevation of 1,000 feet, in a narrow valley ringed on 3 sides by black granite walls 1,500 feet high. It was, in the last week of March 1898, a tent city of some 4,000 people, 1,200 of them women, every inch of the valley floor covered in canvas, with sled dogs chained to every tree, and with the smell of wood smoke and bacon grease and human waste hanging in the cold air without dispersal because the wind did not reach down into the valley. Mary O'Hanlon and Kieran O'Hanlon took 13 days to move their outfit from Canyon City to Sheep Camp, an interval in which, on the afternoon of the 25th of March, Mary was present at the collapse of a snow bridge over the Taya River that drowned 2 men of another party and injured a young woman of 19 named Clara Whitfield of Spokane, and was one of the first at the bank, and helped carry the young woman on a litter made of skis, the half-mile down to Father Duvernay-Bola's tent at the lower end of the camp. At the tent, while the priest set the young woman's broken collarbone with practiced hands that had been trained in a missionary hospital in Fort George in 1881, he said without looking up, "Madame O'Hanlon, the third petition, thy kingdom come." The kingdom is a place where the ledger of what we did and did not do is opened, not so that we may be judged, but so that it may be closed. You have been reading your ledger for 2 years and 3 months. You read it on the beach at Dyea. I saw you. I saw the paper come out of your pocket. I saw you put it back. I am a priest, madame. I recognize a woman with a paper in her pocket. The third petition is about the kingdom in which that paper will be burned, not as a punishment, but as a mercy, because the Father does not require that you continue to carry it. He does not confiscate it. He invites you to lay it down. The laying down is your free act. No one can do it for you, Mary said. Father, I have not come up here to lay it down. I have come up here to climb past it. Father Duvernay-Bola said, Madame, one cannot climb past a thing one is carrying. One can only set it down or carry it to the summit. At the summit, a choice will be offered. That is all. Help me with this splint. Thank you. The scales was the last staging area below the summit proper, at an elevation of 2,200 feet, 3/4 of a mile below the pass. It took its name from the practice of the freighters, who re-weighed each pack at the scales before the final ascent, but because the golden stairs, the last 1,500 vertical feet, were too steep and too narrow for any man or woman to carry more than 50 pounds at a single trip. The O'Hanlon party reached the scales on the 1st of April 1898, after 10 days of moving from Sheep Camp, and made camp in a small snow hollow they shared with a party of 6 Norwegians from Minnesota. Kieran and the 8 men began, on the 2nd of April, the back-breaking work of shuttling the outfit in 50-pound loads up the golden stairs, which were a staircase of 1,500 steps carved in the snow and ice by the thousands of boots that had gone before, rising at a slope of between 35 and 45 degrees. Mary was not expected by Kieran to climb the stairs. She was expected to remain at the scales with the watch cache, and to cook for the men when they came back down, and to resume the climb only after the last load had been staged at the summit. On the 3rd of April at 11 o'clock in the morning, Father Duvernay-Bola came into the scales camp and asked Kieran for the loan of Mary's help for the afternoon, with the last rites of an elderly stampeder of his own party, a widower of 61 from Dubuque named Mr. Ambrose Quinlan, who had collapsed at 8 o'clock that morning at the 3rd switchback of the stairs, and who had been carried back down to the priest's tent, and who would not, in the priest's judgment, live past the afternoon. Kieran gave leave, Mary went with Father Duvernay-Beaulieu. She sat at the head of Mr. Quinlan's pallet for 4 hours and held his hand and listened as he told her, in the last hour of his life, the names of his 7 children in Iowa, and asked her to write those names on a piece of paper and send it to his parish priest at St. Patrick's Church in Dubuque so that the Mass might be said. She wrote the names. Mr. Quinlan died at 3:12 in the afternoon. Father Duvernay-Beaulieu said the commendation of the dying in Latin. Mary sat for another 20 minutes with Mr. Quinlan's body. When she rose to leave, Father Duvernay-Beaulieu said at the door of the tent, "Madame O'Hanlon, the 4th petition, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." You have just seen the will of the Father done on earth in the death of an old man. It was not a cruel will, it was a tender one. His last hour was held by a stranger who wrote down the names of his children. You are the stranger. This is the Father's ordinary way. Go rest. You will need the rest tomorrow. On the morning of the 7th of April 1898, the O'Hanlon party's last 300 pounds of outfit were at the scales, awaiting the final ascent. Kieran had torn the tendon of his right knee on the 6th, during his 41st trip up the stairs with a 50-pound bag of beans and could not carry. The 8 men of the party had gone ahead up the stairs the previous evening with the last of their individual loads, and were at the summit, waiting to be joined. Mary and Kieran had 300 pounds remaining at the scales and no means of relay. Kieran said at breakfast, "Mary, I cannot walk another foot. You will need to take up the 300 in 6 loads. I will sit here. I will not leave the cache. You will come back for me with a sled when you are ready," Mary said. Kieran, "I have not yet climbed the stairs once," Kieran said. "Mary, you will. You have climbed everything else. It is a steeper grade. It is not a different world. Put on the 50 pounds. Start." Mary put on the 50 pounds. She started. Between 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening of the 7th of April, Mary Margaret O'Hanlon climbed the golden stairs of the Chilkoot Pass 6 times, descending empty each time, bringing up 50 pounds each time, for a total of 300 pounds of flour, beans and bacon, moved the last 3/4 of a mile of the 33-mile trail. On the 4th ascent, at approximately 2 in the afternoon, at step 942 of the 1,500, she stopped in the center of the staircase, with the line of stampeders behind her stopped too, and she wept for the first time since the evening of the 4th of December 1896. A woman of her own age, 2 steps below her, a Finn named Mrs. Ano Nurmi of Hancock, Michigan, put one gloved hand on Mary's pack and said, in her careful English, "Sister, you are 1 step from the top. You have only 958 steps remaining. 958 is not a big number. 942 is a bigger number, and you have done it already. Take 1 more step. I will be behind you. I will take 1 more step. We will make it." Mary took 1 more step. She took 957 more. She reached the top at 12 minutes past 4 in the afternoon of the 4th ascent. She set down her pack. She walked back down. She did it twice more. She collapsed at the top of the 6th ascent at 6:41 in the evening. At the summit of the Chilkoot Pass, at an elevation of 3,500 feet above the sea, at a boundary cairn of piled granite that marked the line between the United States of America and the Dominion of Canada, at a small wooden tent occupied by a detachment of the Northwest Mounted Police under Inspector Robert Belcher of Toronto, at 6:41 on the evening of the 7th of April 1898, Mrs. Mary Margaret O'Hanlon, widow of Seattle, aged 34, sat down on her 6th 50-pound pack and closed her eyes, and did not open them for perhaps 8 minutes. When she opened them, Father Louis Duvernay-Beaulieu, who had climbed the stairs himself 3 times that day with his own outfit of prayer books and communion wine and a small tin chalice, was seated, cross-legged in the snow 6 feet from her, with his breviary closed on his lap, and with his round spectacles fogged from the climb and wiped clean with the hem of his cassock. He did not speak. He waited. Mary said in a voice that was not her daily voice, "Father, on the 4th of December 1896 at 5:40 in the evening, I asked my husband Michael O'Hanlon to row out to the clam flat off Vashon Island. There was a southwesterly rising. I knew the southwesterly was rising. I asked him anyway because we had a buyer in Seattle the next morning and we needed the clams. He rowed out. A swell caught the dory. He went over. He could not swim in his oilskins. He drowned. I watched the dory come back empty at 8 o'clock with the tide. I have carried this paper in my pocket." She took out the folded paper. She held it out. Father Duvernay-Beaulieu did not take it. He said, "Read it to me." She read, "Michael drowned because I asked him to row." The priest said, "Madame, you have read me the accusation. "Now read me the verdict," she said. "Father, the verdict is written on the back. I have never read it aloud. I wrote it on the evening of the 5th of December 1896. It says, 'I am guilty. I will carry the guilt for the rest of my life,'" Father Duvernay-Beaulieu said in the voice of a priest who has heard 400 confessions along this trail. Madame O'Hanlon. The 6th petition. "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." It is the only petition that contains a condition. The condition is that we forgive. The trespasses we forgive include our own. There is no forgiveness of any trespass that does not pass through our own hand first, because the hand we use to forgive ourselves is the same hand we use to forgive others, and a hand cannot be taught to do what it has not done. You have not been refusing forgiveness from the Father. You have been refusing forgiveness from yourself. The Father cannot overrule you. He waits. He has waited 27 months. He will wait another 27 if he must. I will ask you now, Madame, at the summit, in the presence of the Royal Northwest Mounted Police and the Boundary Cairn and the State of Alaska and the Dominion of Canada and the Society of Jesus and yourself, whether you are willing to forgive Mary O'Hanlon for asking her husband to row. Take a breath. Answer truthfully. If the answer is no, the paper stays in your pocket and we climb down. If the answer is yes, you give me the paper. I will burn it in the Boundary Cairn tonight. The choice is yours. There is no wrong answer. Mary held the paper in her gloved hand for perhaps 30 seconds. The wind at the summit was moving at perhaps 10 miles an hour out of the north. She could feel it on the back of her neck through the muffler. She could feel the weight of the last 18 hours on her legs. She could feel Michael O'Hanlon at her elbow in the way a widow who is about to set down a 2-year wait feels her husband at her elbow. She said quietly, "Michael, I am going to give the paper to Father. I do not know if you would want me to. I have not been able to ask you. I am going to assume that you would. If I am wrong, you will forgive me in your time." She stood up. She walked the 6 feet to Father Duvernay-Beaulieu. She laid the paper in his open palm. She said, "Father, I forgive Mary O'Hanlon for asking her husband to row." Father Duvernay-Beaulieu said, "In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen." He folded the paper. He put it in the inside pocket of his cassock. He said, "I will burn it at the cairn at dusk with the mounted police as witnesses. You may sit here, Madame, or you may go down to your brother-in-law who is waiting in the snow at the scales with a torn tendon. I would suggest you go down. The climb has been accomplished." Mary went down. Mary O'Hanlon did not sleep on the night of the 7th of April 1898. She sat against the outside wall of the tent at the scales with a wool blanket over her shoulders and with Kieran breathing shallowly inside, and she watched the moon rise over the Chilkoot Pass at 11:15. She thought about Michael O'Hanlon. She had not thought about Michael in the ordinary way a widow thinks about a dead husband for 27 months. She had thought only about the 4 of December evening in the kitchen with the southwesterly rising. Tonight she thought about the Michael of the courting years in Seattle in the summer of 1891, who had once walked 7 miles home to Ballard in the rain to bring her a single yellow rose from a garden on Capitol Hill because she had mentioned the previous Sunday that she had never seen a yellow rose and had wondered whether they smelled different. She thought about the Michael who had cried the day their 3rd child, a girl who had lived 9 hours, was buried in 1895. She thought about the Michael who had, on the morning of the 4th of December 1896, 10 hours before he drowned, tied her apron strings in the kitchen for her when her hands were full of dough. She thought about all the Michaels she had not been permitted, by the weight of the paper, to think about for 27 months. She wept quietly against the tent wall from about midnight until the first gray before dawn. When she was finished weeping, she felt, for the first time since the 4th of December 1896, as if her husband was in the ground where the Lord had permitted him to be laid, and not in her kitchen, waiting for her to explain herself. She slept for 40 minutes sitting up. She was awakened at 5 o'clock by the camp bell. Mary O'Hanlon descended the golden stairs in 22 minutes, running where the snow permitted, sliding where it did not, and reached the scales at 7:03 in the evening, where Kieran was, sitting in the snow with his legs stretched out and his face set in the pale expression of a man who has been in considerable pain for 11 hours without moving. She kneeled beside him. She said, "Kieran, the cash is up, every pound. I have left the paper at the summit. I am a different woman as of 7 minutes ago. We will build the sled in the morning. We will take you up. We will go on to Bennett Lake. We will go on to Dawson. We will do what we came to do." But I am telling you now, while we are alone, that I did not tell you what I was carrying. And I should have, and I am sorry. Kieran O'Hanlon, who had known for 26 months that his sister-in-law was carrying a weight he did not have the right to ask about, said, "Mary, you did not owe me the telling. You owe it to Michael, and you have given it to him. Let me up. I want to sleep in the tent, not in the snow." She helped him up. He slept in the tent. She slept beside the tent. Over the next 6 weeks, through the April and the first 3 weeks of May 1898, the O'Hanlon party built a whipsaw boat at Lake Bennett, stocked it with the outfit, and launched it down the Yukon River system when the ice went out on the 29th of May. They reached Dawson City on the 11th of June 1898. They staked 2 claims on a tributary of Bonanza Creek. They worked those claims through the summer and autumn of 1898, and through 1899, and through 1900. The claims paid a modest return of $4,800 over 3 seasons, enough to allow Kieran to return to Seattle in the autumn of 1900 with a small stake, and enough to allow Mary to remain in Dawson, where she opened in the November of 1900 a small bakery and tea room on Front Street called The Pass, and where she served baked goods and tea and coffee, and on Sunday afternoons a free meal to any widow of the Stampede who wished to sit in the back parlor and have a quiet cup. The bakery operated for 14 years. It closed in the August of 1914. She was 60 years old. She returned to Seattle in the October of 1914. She lived with Kieran's family on Queen Anne Hill for the balance of her life. The bakery Mary O'Hanlon opened at 412 Front Street in Dawson City. On the 14th of November 1900 was a narrow-frame storefront 19 feet wide and 34 feet deep, heated by a Stewart No. 6 cast-iron range in the back, with a wooden counter of birch that ran the length of the north wall, a display case of 3 shelves for the baked goods, a front window that looked across Front Street to the Yukon River, and in the back parlor, 4 round tables with 4 chairs each, covered in red and white checked oilcloth. Mary baked every morning from 2 o'clock until 6. She opened the doors at 7. She closed at 6 in the evening. She did not open on Sundays. On Sunday afternoons between 1 and 4, however, she kept the back parlor open without charge for any widow of the Stampede who wished to come and sit, and she served free tea and a free slice of bread with butter and plum jam, and she sat down at the table with each widow who came, and she listened. She did not offer advice. She did not offer consolation. She did not speak of Michael unless asked. She listened. Between the November of 1900 and the August of 1914, in the back parlor of the bakery called The Pass, Mary Margaret O'Hanlon sat and listened, on 1,702 Sunday afternoons, to the stories of perhaps 1,100 different widows of the Klondike. She told her own story only when asked. She told it truthfully. She said, "I carried a paper in my pocket for 27 months. I gave it to a priest at the summit of the pass in the April of 1898. The priest burned it. The climb had been to the cairn all along. I had not known. You may each of you do the same if you wish. If you do not wish, I will still pour your tea." Father Louis Duvernay-Beaulieu burned Mary O'Hanlon's folded paper at the summit cairn of the Chilkoot Pass at 6 minutes past 9 on the evening of the 7th of April, 1898. In the presence of Inspector Robert Belcher and Sergeant John Clisby of the Northwest Mounted Police, both of whom recorded the event in their duty logs under the heading, "Disposal by fire of one piece of paper at the request of a communicant of the Jesuit mission," with the understanding that the paper had no legal significance and was a private matter of conscience. The log entries survive at the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Archives at Regina, Saskatchewan, under file reference C18898 Chilkoot. Father Duvernay-Beaulieu continued his ministry along the trail until the closing of the pass in June 1898, after which he returned to Sainte Marie-Sous-Sioux, where he served the Ojibwe mission for another 23 years, and where he died in peace at the age of 74 in the winter of 1921. He is buried in the Jesuit cemetery of Sainte Marie-aux-Sioux under a simple granite cross. He is remembered in the journals of 11 Stampeders as the priest of the pass. Mary O'Hanlon died in Seattle on the 14th of October 1934 at the age of 70. She had on her bedside table, at the hour of her death, 3 objects: a small tintype of Michael at 29, the small tin of Frere Antoine's bear grease she had bought a second tin of in 1899 in Dawson, and a folded piece of notepaper on which she had written, on the morning after the burning of the paper at the summit, the words, "The Father was waiting at the cairn. I had been climbing to him. I did not know. Mary O'Hanlon, summit of the Chilkoot Pass, the 8th of April, 1898. She had read that paper every morning for 36 years. It was read at her funeral by her niece Bridget O'Hanlon Murray on the 18th of October, 1934. It is folded, as of this writing, in a cedar chest at her great-granny's house in Tacoma, Washington, under the initials MMO and the date 8 April 1898, which are the initials and the date of the first morning of the rest of her life.